Our session, I believe, will be extraordinarily interesting for you. My name is George Abernathy. For those of you who are new to our game, I am the CRO at FreightWaves. Damn glad to be here. And I've got a fabulous panel this afternoon as we talk about the opportunities and new challenges for warehousing and last mile. My distinguished panel with me, and we are sponsored this afternoon by Prologis, and I want to thank them for their support in this afternoon, as well as other relationships that they have with us, and we want to appreciate it. So I'm going to be very brief on the extraordinary bios that I have for the folks here. Then they're going to do a couple of slides each in their WavesTalks, and then we'll have some opportunity for me to ask them some questions. So to my immediate right is Christy Montgomery. She is also a proud Chattanoogan, as I am. Christy leads the team at Kenco Labs, who identify, research, and prototype creative ideas with the potential to positively impact the supply chain. Next to Christy is Will O'Donnell. Will is the managing director of Prologis Ventures, and Prologis Ventures is the innovative platform and venture capital arm of Prologis. And we'll let Will do a little bit more description there. And finally, on my far right, Eric Berdinis is the senior product manager at Uber Freight. And Eric is the product lead for Uber Freight, an app that seamlessly connects trucking companies with loads to haul. We've got a very significant, we could go, and I know all of you would be appreciative if we did go for hours on both the warehousing and the last mile conversation, but we won't do that. But I'm thrilled to know that these folks are being willing to give us their time right now. So with that, Christy, I'll hand the ball to you.
Thank you, George. So one of the things that George asked me to talk about is kind of how did we get to where we are today in 2018? What is the present state of warehousing and distribution, as well as last mile delivery in the supply chain? So earlier this year, Forbes conducted a survey of senior supply chain leaders, and one of the things they asked was, what do you feel like is happening in the industry as a whole? And over 65% of them responded that they feel like there's a tectonic shift happening in the warehousing and distribution and transportation space right now. And how do we overcome that shift? How do we deal with that shift? Innovation is such a buzzword. I think we've heard it at least 500 times since we've been here. And so disruption is another one of those terms. So how do we address what's happening in the, my clicker's not working, by the way, what's happening in the distribution space with an innovative technology look? And
hey guys, can we advance the slide? Our clicker's not running.
It's okay, I can talk about it without it. So
thank you.
One of the things that's happening, I feel like, is we've hit that perfect storm. And what that means, from my perspective, is really the fact that we've reached a confluence of technology as well as market constraints that are happening in the space. So we've heard a lot about it. I'm not going to reiterate a lot of what we've heard, but when you think about what's happening today in 2018, you've heard about IoT, you've heard about the move to the cloud, you've heard every single vendor, I think yesterday almost, save maybe 2 or 3, talked about how their platform was digitally enabled with artificial intelligence and machine learning. And so there's all the automation, there's the robotics. All of these technologies are reaching their maturation point. And so we're starting to see them now invade the space in the warehouses and in the transportation industry. Coupled with, at the same time, we're seeing record low unemployment rates. We're seeing driver capacity constraints, which I'm sure most of you are pretty familiar with. If you're not sure you should be in this room. Consumer demand changes, so you're seeing an entire market shift in this on-demand generation of I want it and I want it now. And it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's a mattress or a refrigerator or a dress, they want it now. You're seeing constraints with space availability in your key markets. And how do we deal with that? And then you're seeing just overall business model shifts. So it's really interesting the panelists that we have up here today. I'm fortunate to be sitting with some real experts around those specific things. What are we doing about space constraints? Will can speak to that. What are we doing about business model shifts? Everybody talks about the Uberization of this, that, or the other thing, right? So, and everybody talks about innovation as the answer to that. Well, is it really? So there's a lot of talk about the digitization of the supply chain, but what we find really interesting is what's happening disrupting the physical supply chain. So these companies that you see I've listed up here, Stored, Flex, Logistic Compare, there's probably 20 or 30 more that I didn't list. These are the Airbnb of warehousing. These guys are building matchmaking services to find the space for those people that need the space. You're seeing the Home Depots and the Lowe's of the world go and say, I'm going to build 170 new distribution centers. $1.2 billion they're spending to rebuild their physical supply chain. And by the way, Will didn't pay me to have this on this slide, but that building that I have on my slide in the upper right is a Prologis building. And what's interesting about this building is it's a 3-story building. It's one of the first in the United States as a distribution center. You see these in Europe a lot. This is the first one in the US that I know about. So we're seeing the physical constraints of the supply chain change. And what does that mean for last mile delivery? For us, we're seeing a lot of requests for last mile delivery that involve physicality changes for the truck drivers. So it's not just about technology and what they're using. It's also about now they have to go into the person's house and they have to hook up a gas line or they have to connect a TV or something like that. And so it's a change in skill sets for those delivery drivers and what we need them to be able to do. So there's not just the concern of what's the digitization in the supply chain changing, but what's happening with the physical supply chain.
Perfect. Thank you. And that is a beautiful building.
That's a great looking building.
So I'm Will Dunham with Prologis. To give you a really brief overview of, I don't have slides, cool. I will describe my slides. So I work for Prologis. We own about $92 billion worth of assets, all distribution warehouses, about 771 million square feet in 19 different countries. What I'll do for the rest of this intro is really talk through some of the economics that are driving last mile fulfillment. Right now, about 20% of our leasing is done related to e-commerce. So it's one of the bigger drivers we're seeing right now. If you look at kind of historical retail, that a decade ago was about 5%. By 2020, it's expected to get to about 17%. So from talking with a bunch of our customers, big and small, international, domestic, it's really changed, especially in the last couple of years, fundamentally how they look at their supply chain. And there really is. She alluded to having someone like Home Depot is really investing a significant amount of capital right now in actually how they can restructure. And actually Home Depot just signed a lease in that building that was pictured up there. I think the other aspect, there's a dichotomy of time. So if you look at consumer expectations and what we expect in delivery, three-day was, I don't know, 3-4 years ago acceptable. Now 70% of people, according to a Deloitte study, view that as too long. At the same time, congestion in the city in the past 30 years has quadrupled. Basically, the same drive times take about double the times as before. So what used to be what used to be close is now distant. So it's really pushing people to figure out how to get closer to consumer to be able to fill on these expectations. The other aspect we're seeing is really what we're calling a rent gradient. And that's if you look at city center versus we did a chart that shows about 50 miles out. And there's a really steep drop as you go from the city center to about 50 out, where it's almost double the rent. So what we've seen is you really look at supply chain costs that for every dollar that's spent on rent, about $7 is on labor. Same ratio as a dollar on rent's about $10 in transportation. But consumer expectations on proximity and service and speed is really pushing people to be able to pay more and moving closer to the center of the city and really driving rents. And I mean, the building that was shown on the screen, that's about 5 blocks from Seattle's football stadium. So it is an urban multi-story building. Turn it over to you, and here's your clicker.
Hi everyone, I'm Eric Berdinas and I'm the product lead for Uber Freight. You know, in this session, Uber's been in this last mile space for a long time, not necessarily in commercial transportation, but in moving people and moving food and things. So I'll speak a little bit to that point. The core mission at Uber is to ignite opportunity by setting the world in motion. So to break that apart a bit, in the, you know, from the ride-sharing business to delivering food with Uber Eats to Uber Freight, we believe that movement ignites and creates opportunity. So, you know, we can't grow and progress as people and as families and as society if we're standing still. And Uber helps make moving easier. So at Uber Freight, we're focused on unlocking opportunities for carriers and shippers by solving some of these deeply embedded issues in the industry, like the inefficiencies of trucks driving around empty. You know, about 20% of trucks are driving around empty, as well as a lot of inefficiencies that happen at the warehouse side as well. This visualization is something that we took over a typical week on Uber Freight, and it shows that Uber Freight never sleeps. We have drivers who are logging on to the app constantly, looking at rates, booking freight, and eventually delivering the goods that help keep our country moving. Now, to create opportunity for our carrier partners, we actually use a lot of the core matching and routing data that Uber innovated with on the ride sharing and Eat side and brought it to the freight industry for the first time in the last couple of years. So we're able to gather unique data about every single driver, where they like to drive, when they like to be home, and we can offer a personalized experience in the app so that they can only see the loads that are recommended for them, the ones that they're interested in taking. And we think that by showing them these recommended loads, it creates a better experience for them, but also a more efficient network overall from end to end. Now, on the shipper side, this means giving them the most reliable carriers out there. If they know that every time they work with Uber Freight, they're going to get a carrier base that's highly respected and highly engaged in our app and our platform, and they want to move the freight reliably. The shippers also get features like live location tracking, instant quoting, as well as price forecasting. So, you know, and all that's backed by Uber's data team as well as our partners that we work with. But our goal isn't just to make these incremental improvements by introducing technology. We actually want to start from the ground truth of where are these problems in the first place, and some of that does exist in the physical world. So on that note, I want to leave you with a recent product release that we announced called PowerLoop, which touches some of these inefficiencies that we see at warehouses and where we think a service like Uber Freight can help drive some of that efficiency. So PowerLoop is a trailer pool that is able to be accessed by carriers of all sizes, even owner-ops. And traditionally, small carriers and owner-operators haven't had the funds to be able to leave trailers and do drop trailer at facilities around the country. This has been only reserved to large carriers that can fund that sort of operation. But with PowerLoop, it's a trailer pool that we manage and own, and any carrier that works with Uber Freight can pull up, lock onto a trailer at a facility and haul it away with a similar kind of drop trailer style that we've seen large carriers employ. And now that saves them dozens of hours a week. It also saves the warehouses all that time that they're live loading and unloading that now they can do maybe in their off-peak hours. So to kind of show you what this looks like, we put together a little video of our PowerLoop program.
An update for you, 6, 8 hours.
How many breaks can one heart take? Oh, and how many hearts do you want to break? You made a fool of me, and it hurts, baby, it's so plain to see. But how many hearts will it take? Oh, how many hearts will it take, baby? Baby, so many times you made me cry. You went up in the tears. Oh, my, you look alone. Oh, my.
So Uber's technology is aimed at improving logistics at every level, and we're enabling a future where we can leverage the entirety of Uber's logistics platform from cars to Uber Pool to Uber Eats to solve real world needs. And when we do that, problems like last mile become something that's a lot more solvable. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. I appreciate that. So let me try to bridge, and given that we shortchanged you on some slides, I'm going to give you the first chance to take a swing at this one, because the beautiful building in Christie's slide, and then I think about Power Loop. In the building that Christie showed, downtown Seattle, there's nowhere to put a trailer there, I assume, but I can.
There's trailer parking.
Oh, okay. So where do I? So I could put. So Power Loop and the Seattle facility could work together.
Yep. So it's a full deck on the truck court on the second floor.
Okay.
So the first 2 floors are ramp. The third floor is like maker space or office space.
Gotcha. How many trailers could go in there? And any guess?
No.
Okay. And so talking about Power Loop, launched in Texas, how broad is it today?
So today we are still only in Texas, and
Okay.
we're working with a few of our early partners on the shipper side, as well as building up our carrier base. We're looking to expand that across the country because we've seen a lot of interest and a lot of success. There's certainly a trend on the customer side of wanting to move more drop trailer because it helps them manage their facilities in a more efficient way. And on the carrier side, they're no longer waiting the 30+ hours that are average that you wait at facilities. So they want access to this program as quickly as possible as well. The challenge is, how do we scale something like this when keeping the trailers full as often as they can be, and make this something that's economical for everyone. But those savings alone help it scale quite naturally.
Gotcha. So as you think about, Christy, with your customers and having to try to deal with the broader supply chain issues, put you on the spot here. Does the Uber Freight Hyperloop seem to be something that would have application to any of the facilities that you guys are working on?
Well, obviously, we would love to have more drop trailers, just like he said, because we can then schedule our own labor within our facility
Right.
a lot more efficiently and make sure that we have enough labor,
Gotcha.
which with the labor shortage today can be quite difficult. So, yeah, this is a great program.
Oh, okay. Some of the challenges around regulations, whether they be state or other municipalities and the like, Will, when you think about where you guys are going to be doing more Seattles, is it more likely that you'll be seeing more activity for you building up further and further in places like California or Washington or other places where you've got not only space constraints, but some of the government or other municipalities giving you a hard time?
Yeah, I think so. There's a couple of questions embedded in that. I think one, for going vertical, it's something we've done in Japan for 15, 17 years, where we've built 7-story fully ramped warehouses, and there it's space constraints. Seattle is the first market we've done here in the U.S. We have a very large building that will be going up in San Francisco once we get through entitlements. We've looked in New York, looked in LA. So major metropolitan areas with space constraints, we're looking. I think to the second question on environmental concerns, it's something that across many markets that we're seeing, and this is globally, with local agencies getting more concerned about air quality, environmental, working really closely hand in with our partners and the governments on how we are actually progressing. So as a company, we're one of the most 100 sustainable companies globally, not just a real estate, but companies. A lot is our solar program, but then we spend a lot of time really thinking about how to design buildings, what we can do technology-wise to help alleviate some of the congestion and trying to push that forward, because it really will help with municipal approvals and being able to differentiate and, and really provide solutions.
Other than buildings like that, are there any other space or land or other ways that you're looking at doing any innovative things over the next year or two?
Yeah, I mean, we've looked a lot for land-wise around traffic around drop lots and looking at parking that we can get to supplement our buildings. It is a common concern, and people are thinking about it, and really how do we alleviate some of this congestion. I think within warehouses there's a lot of things around automation, connectivity, better visibility, and I think one of the things we're trying to explore is how do you get better connectivity between transportation and the warehouse, so people inside the warehouse have better visibility and can plan ahead. And I know it's something you guys are spending some time on.
Speak to that. How do we, have more, and not just collaboration, but genuine somehow overlap or connections within the supply chain?
So what's interesting is our customers are always wanting us to figure out how we consolidate their freight with others shipping
Right.
out of the same warehouse, right? And yet it's very difficult to do because, okay, I have 20 pallets, you have 25, we can't fit them both on the same trailer. So how do we make that work? And so we've heard it all day long, right? It's about the data. And so how do we hire those really smart data scientists who can understand not only how to parse that data, but how to put it together in ways that generate efficiencies for both our customers, for the carriers, and efficiencies within the warehouse labor space. So I think collaboration is really hard. I think we like to talk a lot about it and how great it would be if we were all talking to each other and we were all connected, and that's the promise of blockchain, right? But I don't think we're there yet. I think we're still struggling as an overall supply chain industry to really get sufficiently connected together. And I think it's likely these companies who are a little bit more willing to think differently. I don't like to say think outside the box, but think differently inside the box that we're in, like the Uber Freights, to say, okay, this is how it's always been done, but how can we kind of change that and help everybody collaborate better and yet not compete? I think where we get stuck in this industry a little bit is because we're all competitors, it's harder to collaborate, right? And so how do we make that happen in a way that we all still get our market share and we do it successfully on behalf of our customers, whether you're a carrier or you're a warehouser or in the material handling space like we are. So I think collaboration is the key, and it's how do we set aside our concerns about the competitive nature and truly be willing to open up and be transparent with what information we have.
You guys, Eric, have obviously, I believe you've gotten to a position where you're going to be sharing equipment. So are you open to that collaborative conversation that Christy's talking about around data and what else can companies that may have some level of co-opetition work together?
Absolutely, and we do see that the market is humongous. There's players in all different spaces, from warehousing to final mile to 3PL. It's not something that you can solve. It's not a problem you can solve without really good collaboration. So that's working with data partners, it's working with warehouses, it's working with state and local governments. The only way that we can make an impact on solving some of the biggest efficiency problems in freight is by collaborating with the subject matter experts in those groups.
Are there particular associations? Someone mentioned blockchain here earlier. Are there associations that you guys are working with that are making progress there or could do better? Anyone coming to BIDA tomorrow?
I started to say, I think George is heading down the path of talking about BIDA here. So yeah, that is one of those, I think, that is a strong association around how do we put the standards in place that allow us all to be comfortable sharing the information.
Gotcha.
So.
Yeah, that's great. So we don't have that much time left, and a massive topic, but Will, I'm going to come to you. You mentioned that 20% figure around e-commerce and the like, and getting closer for that. And you talked about 2020. One of the things in the WavesTalk, let's think out even further. Where will 2025, what will the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex look like with regards to that final mile? Will I be able to do something? What will I be able to do so dramatically differently 7 or 8 years from now that I can't do today that Prologis will be involved in?
I think one of the things we're seeing our customers spend a lot of time is understanding the optimal network for the supply chain. So there's a component of predictive inventory management and understanding what is going to be bought that needs a 2-hour delivery, what should be held back at a more regional, traditional level. So I think that's one of the areas we see our customers spending a lot of time in trying to figure it out, their networks. I think the connectivity between the different nodes, whether it's transportation, the warehouse operations, is a huge focal point for a lot of the different people in the ecosystem. So how continue to foster the collaboration and get that working so we can eliminate some of the inefficiencies that are just inherent in a complex, messy environment, the supply chain today.
Gotcha. Eric, 2025, what will 2025 look like, and what will Uber Freight be doing that is changing our lives from what they are today?
Well, we certainly see a transition and a trend of mobile becoming more and more important across all aspects of supply chain. So from the drivers themselves who now prefer to work through mobile apps than over the phone, we think that that could also extend to warehouse operations where each individual person is much more autonomous and independent. We think that that trend is something that can help drive efficiency because you can centrally organize and dispatch all the units of work from the drivers to the warehouse employees to the connection between the two of them to check in. So continuing to invest in that trend of mobile first is important to us.
Interesting. Christy, 2025, you guys are, what it seems like you're doing is looking into the future. What's the crystal ball look like for 2025 in Kenco's opinion?
So we're touching all points of the supply chain with transportation, distribution, and material handling. I think IoT will be a de facto standard. I think we will see some successes around blockchain. And I do think that a few of us are going to figure out how to collaborate with each other and make our customers happy. I think at the end of the day, it has to be about the customer experience.
I appreciate that, and I think we're getting out of time, but I will say this, thank you, and the innovation comments are great. If it's 2025, and that's when we're finally making blockchain impacts, I'm fairly sure that I will have, I don't know, killed myself before then. So we are going to make progress before then. We will be delivering things before then. But I want to thank the panel and thank everyone for our opportunity this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.